The morning I saw Mama Chika walk out of her room completely naked, humming to herself and pouring water on the ground, I knew whatever she had done had finally caught up with her. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't seeing anything. She was gone. Not dead, but somewhere far away inside her own head. I am writing this because people need to know what happened in that compound. I lived there. I watched all of it from the beginning to the end. What started as a small act of greed turned into something none of us on Awka Road had ever seen before. Our compound had 8 rooms, arranged in a long line with a shared kitchen at the back. The landlady, Mama Tunde, owned all of it. She was a big woman, not fat, but solid, like someone built from clay and left to dry in the sun. She had lived in that compound for over 30 years, and every tenant was afraid of her, though she had never raised a hand at anyone. I moved in during the dry season, the year my first son was born. My wife and I took the room at the far end, near the mango tree. The rent was cheap, the neighborhood was quiet, and Mama Tunde kept the place clean. I thought we had found a good place to settle. I did not know what kind of ground we were standing on. Mama Chika came about 4 months after us. She was a trader, sold second-hand clothes at the main market. She had 2 small children, no husband, at least none that visited. She was friendly enough at first, always greeting people, always borrowing this and that, salt, kerosene, a cup of palm oil. She always promised to return what she borrowed, but she rarely did. We did not complain much. We all had our own problems. But I noticed how her eyes moved when she talked to you. They never stayed still. They looked at your hands, your door, your pot on the fire, like she was always calculating something. My wife noticed it too. She told me not to leave anything outside our door at night. I listened to her. Mama Tunde was known for her soup. Not just known, she was famous for it in the whole street. Every Sunday, she would cook a big pot of ofe nubu, the bitter leaf soup with goat meat and stockfish. The smell would travel from the kitchen across the whole compound and even reach the road. People would slow down when they passed by. But Mama Tunde did not share that soup. She made that clear from the beginning. She would share yam, she would share fried plantain, she would even lend money. But that Sunday soup was hers alone. We used to laugh about it. Nobody knew why she was so serious about it. We thought it was just an old woman's habit. We were wrong. The first strange thing happened on a Sunday evening in October. I was sitting outside my room when I saw Mama Chika walk from the direction of the kitchen holding something covered with a cloth. She was moving fast and looking behind her. I did not think much of it. People carry things. But something about the way she moved made me watch. Later that night, I heard Mama Tunde's voice. She wasn't shouting, she wasn't screaming. She was just talking in a low, flat voice that somehow carried more weight than any shout. She was saying, "Who entered my kitchen?"
Who entered my
over
kitchen?
and over. Just that. Who entered my kitchen? I heard doors opening, people poking their heads out, then silence again. Then Mama Tunde went back inside. By Monday morning, everyone in the compound knew what had happened. Mama Tunde's big iron pot, the one she used every Sunday, was missing. Not just the soup inside. The pot itself was gone. She had checked the kitchen before going to bed the night before. It was there. She woke up and it was not. Mama Tunde came out and stood in the middle of the compound. She looked at each door, one by one. She didn't say anything. She just looked. I saw her eyes stop at Mama Chika's door for a long moment. Then she went back inside her room. I told my wife what I had seen the previous evening, Mama Chika with the covered thing. My wife held her chest and said, "This woman has done something stupid." When the tenants began to talk about the missing pot, Mama Chika joined the conversation as if she had no part in it. She shook her head and clicked her tongue. She said, "Some people have no respect." She said, "Who would do such a thing to an old woman?" She said all the right things, but her eyes were doing that moving thing again. I wanted to say what I had seen, but I was not sure. I had seen a woman carrying something covered with a cloth. That is not proof. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was something else entirely. I kept quiet. My wife looked at me that night and said, "You know what you saw." I did, but I still said nothing. That silence would bother me for a long time after. 3 days after the pot went missing, one of the older women in the compound, Auntie Ngozi, pulled me aside near the borehole. She spoke quietly. She told me that Mama Tunde's pot was not just a cooking pot. She said Mama Tunde had inherited it from her own mother, who had gotten it from her mother before her. She said that pot had been in that family for generations. Auntie Ngozi said some things are kept in the family for reasons that people outside the family don't understand. She said the pot was used in certain ways during certain times of year. She wasn't specific, she wasn't the type to say things plainly, but she made it clear that pot was not just iron and fire. Whatever Mama Chika had taken, she had not just stolen soup. On Thursday of that same week, Mama Tunde left the compound early in the morning and did not come back until almost midnight. Some of the tenants saw her leave. She was dressed simply, but she was carrying a small bag. One of the young men who stayed up late said he saw her return and that when she came back, she looked different, lighter somehow, like she had put something down somewhere. Nobody asked her where she had gone. You did not ask Mama Tunde things like that. But we all felt something had shifted. The air in the compound was different, tighter, like the space before a storm when the birds all go quiet and the leaves on the trees stop moving. It started with Mama Chika's older child, a boy of about 7. He woke up one morning crying and saying his legs were heavy. By afternoon, he would not get up from the mat.
I can't, Mama.
His mother
They're so
took him to the
heavy.
chemist and
Breathe,
got
we'll
medicine.
figure this out.
By the next day, the younger child, a girl, was doing the same thing. Heavy legs, both of them lying flat. We thought it was malaria, it was the season for it, but the chemist's medicine did nothing. Then Mama Chika took them to a proper clinic and they were tested. No malaria. The doctor couldn't find anything. The children just lay there, awake and looking at the ceiling, too tired to cry, too tired to eat. Mama Chika was frightened now. I could see it in her face. On a Friday night, there was a knock at my door. I opened it and Mama Chika was standing there. It was past 10. Her wrapper was tied loosely and her face was swollen from crying. She asked if she could talk to my wife. I let her in. She sat on the floor even though we offered her the chair, and she began to talk. She admitted everything. She said she had taken the pot. She said she had watched Mama Tunde cook for months and the food always looked so good and she was hungry and her children were hungry. And one Sunday, she had just taken it. She said she didn't know about any of what Mama Tunde had told me. She just wanted food. She was crying hard now. My wife sat beside her and held her hand but said nothing. Through the tears, she told us she had eaten the soup herself and given some to her children that Sunday night. She said it tasted different from any soup she had ever eaten. Richer, almost sweet, with a taste that stayed in your throat for a long time. She said her children had asked for more and she had given them from the pot. She said the pot itself she had hidden under a market stall on Monday, planning to sell it to someone who bought scrap iron. But the iron seller looked at the pot strangely and refused to touch it. He said the pot had a smell he didn't like, something under the smell of food, something older. He told her to take it away from his stall. She had brought it back to the compound and hidden it under her bed. My wife sat up straight when she heard that. She asked Mama Chika directly, "The pot is still here, in this compound, under your bed." Mama Chika nodded and started crying harder. My wife stood up and said simply, "You need to go and return it to Mama Tunde tonight, right now, and you need to tell her everything." Mama Chika shook her head. She was afraid. She said she didn't know how to face the old woman. My wife told her that her fear of facing Mama Tunde was less important than her children getting better. She said, "Whatever this is, it started when you took something that wasn't yours. The only direction is back." Mama Chika wiped her face. She sat there for a long time. Then she stood up and went to her room to get the pot. My wife went with her. I stood in my doorway and watched. It was almost midnight. The compound was quiet. Mama Chika was carrying the pot to Mama Tunde's door and knocked. There was a long silence. Then the door opened. Mama Tunde stood there in the darkness, looking at the pot and then at Mama Chika with an expression I cannot fully describe. It was not anger. It was not pity. It was something more like recognition, like someone who had already seen how a story ends. My wife came back and told me that Mama Tunde had not cursed Mama Chika. She had not threatened her or said she would report her. She had taken the pot, told Mama Chika to go home and sleep, and closed the door. That was all. My wife said Mama Tunde had not even seemed surprised. We lay awake for a long time that night. The compound was quiet, but it was not a comfortable quiet. At around 3 in the morning, I heard something. A sound from Mama Tunde's room. Not words, not singing. A low sound, almost like humming but slower. Rhythmic. It went on for about 20 minutes and then it stopped. After that, I slept. The next morning, Mama Chika's children woke up and asked for food. That was the first time in 5 days they had asked for anything. Mama Chika came to our door with tears on her face and told my wife. The children ate a
Mama,
full
I'm
meal
hungry.
and by
Me
afternoon
too.
they were
Let's get
outside
food.
playing near the mango tree. Whatever was sitting on them had lifted.
Mama, I'm hungry.
But something
Me
else
too.
had
Let's
happened.
get food.
Mama Chika herself looked different. Not sick, not exactly, but there was something behind her eyes now. Something watching, something waiting. She smiled and thanked my wife, but the smile didn't reach that watching thing behind her eyes. My wife noticed it too. She told me about it that evening and we agreed not to say anything. We thought it would pass. Over the next 2 weeks, the changes in Mama Chika were small enough that you could explain them away. She started waking very early, before 5, and sitting outside her door in the dark. When you greeted her, she would respond normally, but her attention was somewhere else. She stopped going to the market some days without any explanation. Her children were fine. That part was clear. They played, they ate, they went to school. It was only Mama Chika herself who seemed to be slowly becoming a different person. Auntie Ngozi said nothing, but I noticed she stopped sitting near Mama Chika in the evenings the way she used to. That said more than words. By the 3rd week, Mama Chika began talking to herself, not under her breath, out loud, in full sentences, having both sides of a conversation.
That's why you're here.
You would walk past her room
Exactly.
and hear her respond to things that weren't being said by anyone you could see. The words
You
were
feel it too,
ordinary
don't you?
enough on their
Of
own,
course you do.
but the
That's why you're
context
here.
was wrong. The
Exactly.
timing was wrong. One afternoon, I passed her near the borehole, and she looked at me and said, "She says you were kind." I asked who said that. She just smiled and turned back to the water. I walked quickly back to my room and told my wife. My wife said, "Something is in that woman." Not in the way people say it, to mean she is acting strange. She meant it plainly. During all of this, Mama Tunde said and did nothing. She went about her life as usual. She collected rent. She swept in front of her door. On Sundays, she cooked her soup in the kitchen with the same pot. But I noticed she watched Mama Chika with those flat, quiet eyes of hers. Not with cruelty, more like someone waiting for a boss they know is coming. I tried once to approach Mama Tunde about what was happening. I said in a careful way that I was concerned about Mama Chika. Mama Tunde looked at me for a moment and then said, "Leave what is happening to happen." I asked what she meant. She said, "Some lessons cannot be taught. They have to be lived through." Then she went inside and closed her door. 3 Sundays after the pot was returned, I woke up at around 2 in the morning to the sound of footsteps outside, slow, steady footsteps, going back and forth in front of the rooms. I lay still and listened. My wife was asleep beside me. I got up and looked through the small gap in our curtain. Mama Chika was walking, back and forth, the length of the compound. Her eyes were open. Her face was empty. She was wearing her sleeping dress and her feet were bare on the concrete. She walked for what must have been 40 minutes before going back into her room. The next morning, I asked her if she had slept well. She said she had slept fine. She didn't remember waking up at all. She looked confused when I pushed further. She genuinely did not know. Mama Chika's children started coming to our room more often, not because we invited them, but because children know things. They would sit near my wife while she cooked, and they would be quiet in a way that children that age are rarely quiet. The older one, the boy, told my wife one afternoon that Mama talks at night, but she says she is sleeping. My wife gave them food and let them stay as long as they wanted. She started leaving a small bit of food at their door in the evenings without making it obvious. Mama Chika, in her clearer moments, would thank her and look ashamed. In those moments, she was still herself,
but the moments were getting shorter. I finally pressed Auntie Ngozi for more information. We were at the borehole early one morning, just the two of us. I told her everything I had seen and asked her to speak plainly. She was quiet for a while, pumping water. Then she said that the pot was used in a practice that her own grandmother had described to her, a way of keeping the family safe and prosperous. The soup cooked in it carried something, not poison, not medicine exactly, something passed down. She said, when an outsider eats from that pot without permission, the thing inside has no family to go to. It stays. It looks for somewhere to land. She said, in the old stories, the person who stole and ate from such a pot would begin to carry a present that wasn't theirs. Over time, it would take more and more of them until either a resolution was found or there was nothing left of the person to take. I asked Auntie Ngozi if there was anything that could be done. She said the pot had been returned, which was the first step and the most important one. She said Mama Tunde going out that Thursday night had likely been her attempt to manage the situation from her own end. But she said the woman who took from the pot would still have to pay some kind of cost. The thing inside needed to leave the way it came in, through acknowledgement and through time. She said Mama Chika needed to stop pretending she had done nothing wrong. Not to us, to whatever had entered her. She needed to speak to it out loud, to say she had taken what wasn't hers, and that she was sorry, and that she was giving back what she had kept. Auntie Ngozi said this sounded like madness, but that madness was exactly what happened when you refused to speak to things that were already speaking to you. That brings me back to the beginning, to the morning I described in the very first lines. I was sitting outside drinking tea when Mama Chika's door opened and she walked out with no wrapper, no blouse, nothing. Her children were still inside. She walked to the center of the compound and began to hum. She poured water on the ground from a cup she was holding, though I hadn't seen her pick up any cup. Other tenants came to their doors. Nobody moved. Nobody knew what to do. We just watched. She stood there for about 10 minutes, humming this low, formless sound. Then Mama Tunde came out of her room. She walked straight to Mama Chika, stood in front of her, and said one word. I couldn't hear it clearly from where I stood. But Mama Chika stopped. She blinked. She looked down at herself, and then around at all of us, and then she screamed. My wife rushed out with a wrapper and covered her. Mama Chika was shaking and crying and asking what had happened. Where was she? What was she doing outside? Her children ran out when they heard the scream, and the boy held onto her mother's leg and cried too. It was a painful thing to see. All of us stood there, not knowing what to do with our hands. Mama Tunde watched the whole thing quietly. When Mama Chika was covered and sitting on the ground still shaking, Mama Tunde said to everyone, "Go inside. This is finished now." And she went back into her room. People obeyed. I don't know exactly why. Her voice had a weight that moved people. We all went inside. The compound went quiet. The days after that were strange in the way that things are strange after a storm passes. Everything looked the same, but felt altered. Mama Chika stayed in her room for 2 days, and neighbors brought food to her door. When she came out, she was quieter than before, not in the disturbing way of recent weeks, but like someone who had been very sick and was now simply tired. She didn't try to explain what had happened to her. She didn't ask anyone what they had seen. She just moved carefully, like someone learning to walk in a new body. She started going back to the market after a week. Her children went back to school. From the outside, it looked like things were returning to normal. But you could see in her eyes that she knew something now that she hadn't known before. About 2 weeks after the incident, Mama Chika came to my door alone, without her children. It was an evening, and my wife was inside. She stood at the door and spoke to me directly. She said she knew I had seen her take the pot that Sunday. She said she was not angry at me for not speaking up. She said she understood that I was not sure, and that even if I had spoken, it would not have changed what she did. Then she said something that stayed with me. She said, I was hungry, and I saw something that looked like it was just food. But nothing that belongs to someone else's is ever just what it looks like. She said it quietly, not dramatically. It didn't sound like a lesson she was trying to teach me. It sounded like something she had understood the hard way and was simply saying out loud. Mama Tunde never once brought up the pot in public, never told the story, never mentioned it. She continued to cook her Sunday soup. She continued to collect rent and keep the compound clean. If you met her on the street and watched her, you would think she was just a landlady going about her business. But she had changed in one small way. She left her kitchen door open now, on Sunday afternoons while she cooked. Not all the way open, just a little. And sometimes the smell of the soup would be stronger than before, carrying out across the compound and down the road, like she was letting the world smell it without anyone needing to take it. I don't know if that was intentional. With Mama Tunde, it was always hard to know. I'm telling you this because I have moved out of that compound now. My family relocated when my job changed. We said goodbye to Auntie Ngozi and the others, and to Mama Chika and her children, and even to Mama Tunde, who shook my hand at the gate and told me to greet my wife. Normal goodbyes, like nothing had happened there. But things did happen there, and I think about the way we all stood watching Mama Chika that morning and didn't know what to do. I think about how long I kept quiet about what I had seen. I think about how Mama Chika said she was hungry and saw something that looked like food. I think about how many times in life we take something that looks like it belongs to no one, like it's just sitting there, available, and we don't ask whose it is or what else it carries. I am not a superstitious man. I was raised to look for practical explanations, but I lived in that compound and I saw what I saw. Maybe there is a scientific explanation for all of it. Maybe Mama Chika had a breakdown from stress and guilt
And poor nutrition and everything she was carrying. Maybe the children's illness was real malaria that the test missed. Maybe the timing was coincidence. But I also know that Mama Tunde said one word, and a woman who did not know where she was suddenly came back to herself and screamed. I know that a pot of iron made a scrap dealer refuse to touch it. I know that a soup tasted different from any soup a grown woman had eaten in her life. You can explain one of those things, maybe two. But all of them, in the same compound, around the same pot, I don't know. I am still deciding what I believe. The last time I saw Mama Chika was the day we moved out. She came with her children to help carry some of the smaller things. When the car was loaded and we were saying goodbye, she pulled me aside and pressed something into my hand. I looked down. It was a small piece of iron, flat and round, about the size of a coin. She said Mama Tunde had given it to her after everything was over, and she wanted me to have it for my family's new home. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't ask. I put it in my pocket. When we got to the new house, my wife placed it near the door without me even telling her to. She just held it for a moment and then set it down there, like it was obvious where it should go. Maybe she was right. Maybe some things know where they belong. Maybe that is the whole point of this story, that things know where they belong, and trouble starts when we forget to ask before we take. If you enjoyed this story, kindly like and follow for more interesting stories like this.